vote our power. The congressional candidates for District 2 will follow this at 6:30. My name is Vanessa Schwartz, and I'm the Executive Director at Metropolitan Family Services. I will be your co-facilitator today.
Hello, my name is Ana Guajardo with Centro de Trabajadores Unidos. If anyone needs Spanish, si ocupan traducción en español, pueden dirigirse a Cintia, que está atrás, y vamos a tener la traducción para ustedes. We would like to welcome Reverend Nassenby from the Pilgrim Baptist Church, who will be doing the welcoming address.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Oh, come on. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We're in a new decade. I am Corbin Lassenby, pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church, and we, the members of Pilgrim Baptist Church, are excited to have this forum in our community. We're grateful for our candidates to be here with us today. Can we celebrate our candidates?
Yes.
If you take a look over your shoulder, look at the balcony if you would. For those that are tuning us in by way of Facebook Live, we welcome you in. If you look at the banners, all the banners are strategically located, lapping over one another. It is our concern, it is always our love to continue to put ourselves together. We are a knitted group of individuals who are concerned about the South Chicago area, and that's why we have our banners overlapping one another to let us know that we are unified in everything we would do. And so tonight, as we look at uniting our voices is an alliance of organization of Chicago Southeast Side that have come together to address diversity issues in our community. And some of our organizations present work in the south suburbs of Chicago. This has been sponsored by the following community institutions: Alliance of the Southeast, CTU, United Workers Center, Clarice and Associates, the Coalition for Southwork CBA, Metropolitan Family Services, South Chicago, Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church of South Chicago, and the Southeast Environmental Task Force. Tonight we have a broad representation of Latino, African American, and white voters who have come from various parts of the 13th Senate District and the 2nd Congressional District, and to all listen to the candidates and speak on issues that directly impact us. Tonight we ask that all of those who are in attendance that we would be respectful to our candidates, that we would always understand that whatever we do would be decent and in order, and we want to make sure that when they leave tonight, that they'll know that they were in the ward of the 10th ward, and that we have not only class, but that we have concerns. And so when we turn it over to our next facilitator, again, if you need anything, our bathrooms are downstairs, water fountains, beverage machines, and also snack machines. We would just ask that you not eat in the sanctuary. Again, thank you on behalf of Pilgrim Baptist Church.
So here are the ground rules for the candidates and everyone else here. For rules for the candidates, respect our timekeeper, Alan Lindrum. He will be our timekeeper. Please stand, Alan. When you get near to the end of your time, he will hold up a flyer with the time remaining. Do not go over your time or the microphone will be turned off. Respect the other candidate. No jeering and no insults. Remember, we are in church, so no lying. No partisan applause or yelling from your volunteers. No electioneering inside the church. Rules for the audience. Everyone, please turn off your cell phones. Hold your applause until the end of the event. Respect everyone present. No partisan applause or yelling. No campaign buttons, t-shirts, or literature to be passed out inside the building or worn. And bathrooms are downstairs on your right to the bottom of the stairs should you need them.
We would like to welcome candidates Robert Peters, who's currently our senator in the area, and Ken Thomas, who's running for the seat.
Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer each question after it is read. The questions being asked were put together by the organization sponsoring the event, which reflects the communities they represent.
For those the audience who would like to ask questions, we're going to have someone walking around passing index cards, and throughout the event we're going to collect these index cards. We want to make sure that the questions that are written are not do not refer to personal attacks, and to make sure that they're nonpartisan. All of the organizations here are nonpartisan, and so we want to make sure that we respect that. And so questions will be read for both candidates. And each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the questions and give the responses. And so we'll make sure we pass these cards around soon. So the first question, we're going to have Angela Herlick from Christian Associates, who's going to talk about CRA.
Thank you to both candidates. My name is Angela Herlock. I'm the Executive Director for Christian Associates, a community development corporation that's been here in South Chicago since the 90s. So my question is about the CRA, the Credit Reinvestment Act, which you both are familiar with. Currently, that's under review for changes that will gut the integrity and true purpose of that bill. This includes changes to measurement of investment, moving to a pass-fail process, which we believe, a lot of us in the community believe, will disincentivize motivation for banks to support community efforts to redevelop, and not clear reporting. Currently, the CRA is slated to be revised. Current suggestions, revisions include decreasing the requirements of banks to report investments moving to a pass-fail nature, like I mentioned, in and away from comparative scoring, and judging investment as a whole versus through a lens of type and who the recipients are. So let me give you an example. If a bank is giving $30 million or designated $30 million to a neighborhood, they would give just as much credit for putting a $30,000 Megatron into a stadium as they would for doing $100,000 loans to low-income families. Those are not the same things, right? So our question is, as the Southeast side is still fighting to recover from the foreclosure crisis and utilizing various different investment measures, how will you fight? We understand that this is a national type of legislation, but how will you fight on the state level to maintain the integrity of the CRA so that banks don't skirt their responsibilities towards rebuilding our disinvested neighborhoods?
Thank you, Angela. If you can stay here. Robert Peters.
Not working.
So I have 1 minute?
Yes.
All right, 1 minute, 1.5 minute. So what I would say is, to me, there's been a serious issue in terms of the financial sector and the banking sector investing in more privileged folks and the needs of more privileged folks and not into communities like ours. And we've seen this, I'll stay up here for right now. We've seen this specifically when it comes to the foreclosure crisis, where 64% of all wealth is owned, 64% of all wealth is in real estate, but home ownership is at a 50-year low. Which means when it comes to investment and banking, a select few get to benefit from it, while the rest of us have to struggle. So I'll constantly be fighting financialization and the financial institutions to make sure that when it comes to investment and credit, that it is equitable and fair. I think that's utterly important. My mom lost her home. She passed away with $200,000 in debt on the verge of losing her home. We see in terms of how downtown and the north side have gotten the investment that they need compared to us. So in any effort in terms of fighting to make sure that financialization is equitable and fair, I will definitely be on the standing side of working folks down here. So.
I think we're working now. So first, I think the act is in Congress, right? So it's not in the state legislature. But what we can do in the state legislature is make sure that investment is being driven and directed to neighborhoods and communities that have not been invested in a very long time. South Chicago is one of those neighborhoods. My aunt lives right down the street, and she suffered from seeing no investment in this neighborhood for decades and decades. And so how do we put financial institutions in a position to actually invest in our communities? I think for one, we need to stop giving them incentives to do the kinds of investments that they're already doing. You see investments in these big developments on the north side, Lincoln Yards, right? The city put major amounts of tip dollars into an investment that will be $1 billion windfall for developers. And they're not developing in the communities that haven't been developed in. They're developing where the money already is. So we have to make sure that as a city and as a state, we're not actually incentivizing these folks to invest in communities that already have the wealth, and to actually invest in communities that have long not been invested in, including South Chicago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, it's important to ensure investments and access to good loans in our communities. Our next question is on worker cooperatives, and so we have Adelaida Luna with Centro de Trabajadores Unidos. And Ava will be doing the transition.
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias a ustedes, candidatos, por estar aquí. Mi nombre es Adelaida Luna y represento Centro de Trabajadores Unidos. Sabemos de primera mano que las cooperativas de trabajadores son una solución a los abusos de una economía de bajos salarios. Cooperativas crean riqueza por y para nuestras comunidades. Las empresas cooperativas dan oportunidades laborales justas a trabajadores de color, mujeres y trabajadores inmigrantes, que se han visto obligados a realizar trabajos de bajos salarios debido al sexismo y el racismo en nuestra economía. Ciudades en estados como California, Nueva York, Ohio, Wisconsin han creado más oportunidades económicas para apoyar la financiación, los contratos y la asistencia técnica para las cooperativas de trabajadores. A partir de este año, la aprobación exitosa de la ley de la Asociación de Cooperativas de Trabajadores Limitados de Illinois reconoce legalmente a las cooperativas de trabajadores, pero todavía tenemos trabajo que hacer. ¿Qué más se puede hacer para apoyar y permitir que las cooperativas de trabajadores prosperen en nuestro estado? ¿Y qué puede hacer el Estado para apoyar las necesidades financieras de nuestras cooperativas? Gracias.
So I'll just translate for Adelaida. So good evening, my name is Adelaida. Thank you so much for being here. And the question is, we know firsthand that worker cooperatives are a solution to the abuses of a low-wage economy. Worker cooperatives being businesses that are owned democratically by workers who are also owners. They create wealth and entrepreneurship by and for our communities. Cooperative businesses give ownership and fair job opportunities to workers of color, women, and immigrant workers who have been forced into low-wage jobs because of sexism and racism in our economy. Cities and states like California, New York, Ohio, and Wisconsin have created more economic opportunities to support funding, contracts, and technical assistance for worker cooperatives. Starting this year, the successful passage of the Illinois Limited Worker Cooperative Association Act legally recognizes worker cooperatives, but we still have a lot of work to do. What else can be done to support and allow worker-owned cooperatives to thrive in our state? And what can the state do to support the financial needs of the startup of co-ops?
So Ken?
Yeah, so I think this is wonderful. I think it's the kind of thing that we really need to think about how we can incentivize as a state to get more. This is sort of the American dream that we've seen go away, right? A worker being able to work at a business that they are also part owner and have a stake in, so that when they're working, it's not about exploitation of that worker and trying to drive them to do as much work for the company and drive as much profit for the people who own the company, but actually to share in the profits. Because you're sharing in the effort, you're sharing in the work. So I think at a state level, it would be very useful if we could get some incentives for workers' cooperatives so that folks who are actually working at these workers' co-ops can continue to build wealth for their families that's going to working people and provide some sort of financial incentive so that businesses would actually want to become workers co-ops or build businesses that will create workers co-ops, because there would be a financial incentive to do it. The great thing about it is, because the workers are the ones who own and democratically run that business, they actually are the beneficiaries of that financial incentive. So that I think would be one way we could strengthen and expand workers co-ops in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, can you hear me? So I was proud to support HB 3663, which is the Limited Worker Cooperative Act. It helps being able to now register in Illinois, which is important. I'm also willing to defend it when it comes to the Secretary of State's office and to work with them as well. I think it's important that I go to folks at the Department of Banking and work with them. So I'm willing to work with folks to find out what we can do at the Department of Banking as well as DCO, and at least see something legislatively that can move funds and target investment, especially from the Treasurer's office. So I think it's very important that we do this. I think it's vitally important to the economy. We've had a consolidated, everything's becoming more and more like Amazon, which hurts both. As much as it might seem that it's cheaper for folks, makes it harder for folks who are working. It means that when it comes to our control, a select few people have control over both our economic, political, and social system. But if we can create an economy that allows people to own what they produce and democratically own it, we create a more democratic and fair economy, and we can allow people to be, in areas that have seen years and decades of disinvestment, to control the investment in the communities that they live in. So I think it's vitally important that we invest in worker cooperatives, expand worker cooperatives, and I will always fight for this. Thank you.
¿Alguien necesita traducción? Levante la mano, por favor. Thank you for supporting entrepreneurship and creating more opportunities for wealth. It is important for our communities. Ushers are collecting the index cards with questions for candidates. If you would like to submit a question, please write on the index card given to you. Now we have a question about healthy development.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Marie Collins Wright. I'm Vice President of the Jeffrey Manor Community Revitalization Council and member of the Coalition for South Fork CBA. I have been a resident in Chicago for about 50 years. The southeast side of Chicago is continuing to suffer from the burden of toxic industry, dirt, and dust. TIF funds are allowed by state law. The funds that should be used in our communities on the south and west sides of Chicago are being spent on the north side and downtown. If you take a look at the TIF map. Lincoln Yards and the 78 project got over $1 billion in TIF funds, in money that is sorely needed on the south and west sides. The state of Illinois will spend $6 billion to purchase the transportation hub, One Central. These are locations that are driven by big business and are not blighted. South Forks is one of the largest developments in the Midwest, 3 times the size of Lincoln Yards and the 78. It could create up to 100,000 jobs. We need funds to remediate and develop South Forks, create employment in the community, and investment here on the southeast side. What will you do to change the way TIF and state funds are being used to help struggling communities like ours on the southeast side? And how will you bring funds to the table to clean up current sites, South Forks, brownfields, and Superfund sites in our district?
Yeah, so, thank you. I think when we look at South Forks, I always see there's this golden opportunity, and it's got to be done in the right way for everybody. We've seen promises at South Forks over and over and over again, and it moves from one person to another to another. And I think that if people aren't actually investing, then we have to do that. And I think it's important, you know, in terms of TIF reform, though I have some concerns about TIFs overall, but moving money directly into Southworks to do a few things. I think it's an opportunity for us to have affordable housing. It's an opportunity for us to combine that with renewable energy, sustainable energy like solar. It's an opportunity for us to clean up the area, and then it's another opportunity to create an actual transit hub that's needed for the south side of Chicago. One way we do that is there's always capital and infrastructure spending. There's some TIF reform. There's making sure that when it comes to community investment, that we can actually move that money, we expand it. You know, there's work that the treasurer can do about that as well. And I think all of that combined, as well as the Affordable Housing Fund, as well as putting more money in the IEPA, all of that combined can help be driven towards Southworks to 10 seconds, to help lift up Southworks that deserves to be a thriving community for the 21st century.
This question is personal for me. My dad was a steel worker, and he worked at the old Southworks plant back in the day. He eventually moved up to the 111th Street Ryerson plant, but was laid off when the plant closed in 2006, 2007. And so the fact that this site, which was mentioned, is 3 times the size of some of the developments that have seen serious economic investment that is not in our community is really disappointing. It's saddening. It's left a hole in our community as far as jobs, as far as actually building a strong neighborhood where folks can raise their kids, send their kids to a strong local public school. And so we really have to think about how are we going to go about making sure that we are investing in this community that hasn't seen investment in a very long time. And we're living in a world now where the jobs are no longer in the neighborhoods. The jobs are very much focused downtown. And so we have an issue where we don't have transportation to where the jobs is, at least good, solid public transportation. If you're talking about the southeast side, we have folks fighting for something that I really support, which is getting more affordable metro rates. So folks can actually commute downtown quicker and use that as an option to get to where the jobs are. And so I'm a big fan of the metro proposal because spending an hour and a half on 2 buses to get downtown isn't going to be great if you want to have a solid job down there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We need healthy developments in our community that benefit local residents. Now we have a question on education from Vanessa.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Schwartz. I'm the Executive Director of Metropolitan Family Services. My question is on after school. After school programs are common, community-driven, expanded learning opportunities that support positive youth development. 84% of parents support public funding for after school programs, and 72% feel after school programs are essential for their communities. Despite this consensus, 433,390 young people are alone after school in the state of Illinois. For every 1 child in an after-school program, there are 2 children in need of a spot in the program. The governor has proposed an increase in after-school funding if he's able to get his graduated income tax passed this November. What would you do to address this issue if elected?
I think this is so important. After-school programs and giving kids the opportunity to either get extra help at school or to be involved in activity and be with their other kids after school and not be out on the streets or, oftentimes parents, they work until late. My mom certainly did. I was raised in a single parent household. My mom often didn't get home until after 6, and we would get off school at 2:30 or 3. And so we were sort of out in the wind for a little bit. We've got to invest in after-school programs so that kids can have an opportunity to stay busy and focused and perhaps even get extra educational help at our schools, in that meantime. And so I completely support the fair tax, and you guys will have an opportunity to vote on that in November, but particularly so that we can get more after-school funding. I recall a recent parent talking to me, telling me that at their school, their child had to choose between doing sports and music. But they couldn't do both. And as somebody who knows the rigors of college applications processes, if you want your kids to do really well, they've got to have the best resume. So if you can have sports and music, that's good for them. We shouldn't restrict our kids to having to choose between one or the other. Every strong neighborhood public school in Chicago, the kids there should have the choice of both.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand how important after-school programs are. You know, my mom is an alcoholic. She really struggled. I didn't want to go home. And, you know, this is back in the 90s and early 2000s, so I hung out in the park. You know, I had a neighbor's door open. And I think a lot of people are going through that, whether it's work or whether it's some pain going on in your home. And so I think it's important that in the budget that we fund the expansion of after-school programs. I think it's also important that we make sure that if we can't get it specifically from the state, that we connect, you know, keep like After School Matters, to be able to connect people to the schools to get that done. I think it's a combination of things where you don't want to extend the school day. You want people to be, want young folks to be able to have their imagination, because when they have their imagination, they can create so much. But you want to make sure that they have some safety and some dignity and a place to be. And I think there's ways to do that both from the state with funding as well as connecting, whether it's art programs, whether it's universities, to doing after-school programs at the same time. I think it's vitally important. I always say, you know, one part of, you know, being able to be a smart person isn't that you're just able to put together numbers, but that you're able to creatively put together numbers, and you do it with a great, beautiful imagination that young people should have. So, yes, I'm fully supportive of expanding after-school programs as much as possible.
Thank you. The ushers are collected the index cards with questions for the candidates. If you'd like to submit a question, please make sure that you write an index card and give it to Jasmine, and we can read them. So now we'll read some questions from the audience. Just a reminder about the guidelines we follow for the question. Respect everyone present. Questions will be read for both candidates to answer. We will only read questions that are not repetitive and nonpartisan, and we will not read questions that have personal attacks. Please note you have 1 minute. We want you to respect all people's times. We will alternate who's first for each question. So the first question, in July 2017, it became effective that Cook County judges are required to set affordable bail amounts for all defendants, leading to a substantial reduction in the Cook County jail population. Do you think this has played in the release of gun offenders, making it easy for them to post bail and getting back on the street to commit more crimes with guns? How will you make this work effectively and keep serious crime offenders from being able to easily post bail? We'll go with Robert.
Yeah, I mean, so I have this bill to end cash bail, but what it has in there that we don't currently have is it puts in statute that if you are dangerous, you are seen as dangerous to other folks, that you are detained. That is a very important piece because currently, if you have money and you are dangerous, you could afford to be able to come out because we have cash bond. We have to have cash bond because 99.2% of folks are in there simply because they are poor and they should be able to come out and go back to court. We have a system in place that says if you are R. Kelly or Harvey Weinstein, you're allowed to go out, but if you're Joe Schmo and you've been working class, you are locked up. And that only makes it harder and harder for people to be lifted up. So I understand the problem. We do have a concern when it comes to dangerousness. And so when we have this new cash bond, we had cash bond, we're also going to make sure to include a component that if you're dangerous and it shows you some evidence, that you're detained so you don't hurt others.
Ken?
I think as a general principle, people shouldn't be held in jail because they're poor. That's just how it should be. And for the last however long we've had bail since the beginning of this country, folks have been held, whether they were poor or they were rich. If you could pay, you could get out. If you couldn't pay, you didn't get out. And that's not a system that we should have. We see that bleed into all kinds of other areas. That people who do not have the money, because they weren't born rich, because they don't have tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to post bond, they end up discriminated against, and they end up in jail. Oftentimes for very long times, because you're awaiting trial, and sometimes you don't get trial for years and years, and then maybe you're found not guilty. And you were in jail for 3 years, even though you were not even guilty of the crime that they accused you of. So nobody should have to sit in jail just because they're poor. And so we should certainly end cash bail.
Okay, next question. What is your position on the closure of the two of our community hospitals, and are you supporting the merger of the 4 hospitals? Can you explain to us why these closures are happening, especially Trinity Hospital? Ken?
No. So this has been a problem all over our city. We're seeing lots of closures. Well, one, we're seeing community hospitals struggle generally all over this district, from Trinity to Jackson Park to all over this district. And so why are we seeing them closed? We really have to look at the reimbursement rates. There was a bill that was passed during the Rauner administration that actually gave more money to some of the bigger hospitals that weren't actually doing so bad than it did some of our community and neighborhood hospitals. And so our neighborhood hospitals are struggling, and they're being closed up primarily in low-income communities. So we need to figure out how we can actually put resources into our community hospitals as opposed to putting them into hospitals in the suburbs that are doing quite well.
Yeah, so this has been a huge problem. Our safety nets are some of the core components when it comes to access to care. And what we've seen under hospital transformation, where the money is moved, that our tertiary, so your big hospitals are getting all this funding, they get all this money, they get all this support, and our smaller hospitals are increasingly being crunched, and it's causing them to have more and more pain, less and less customers, less and less investment inside the hospital itself. So there's a whole debate that's going to go on around what happens with hospital transformation. I think it's important that our safety nets are protected. I think that it's important that they're lifted up. And I think it's important that when we do transformation money, that the Medicaid dollars are able to be spent in the neighborhood and the communities most in need.
Okay, our next question is also on education. So the first question is, do you support charter or neighborhood schools? So I'll do the 3 so that, so why don't you go ahead and answer the first question. Do you support charter or neighborhood schools?
I'm proud to be endorsed by CTU and IFT and IEA, so no, I do not support charter schools.
I would be weary of endorsements. There are groups like CTU who didn't invite me for a meeting, so it's not always a very competitive and open process when you get some of these endorsements. But no, I do not support charter schools.
I would just like to add, he was interviewed by IFT and he still endorsed me.
What are your thoughts on how schools are currently funded, and what do you think should be done to ensure greater equity of resources?
Yeah, I think the school funding formula needs to be amended so that money can go directly to schools most in need, combined with the fact that, as we talked about with the fair tax, we get more money, education dollars that can go into the system. So both the school funding formula plus the fair tax and more money into education can then go to our schools most in need, and I think that's the most vitally important piece.
As far as school funding, for a long time we've had a funding process that has been based on an inequitable system, our property taxes. If you live in a rich neighborhood, you have higher property values, which means you have an ability to raise more money for your schools. If you don't live in a rich neighborhood, your property tax base is not as rich, so you don't have as much ability to raise money to fund your schools. We should end funding our schools based on property taxes and an equitable system that just continues to restore that inequity, and we should base it on more state funding. Our states should be investing much more than they do into our schools statewide, like other states do. We're pretty bad as far as, out of the 50 states and how our state actually invests in our schools. We're pretty low on that list.
Okay, Okay, the last question is, how should the teacher shortage be addressed? And how would you support efforts to make teaching as a career more attractive to college students? And then what would you do for schools to support equipment, funding, and technology? So, okay.
Yeah, I think for one, another place where we have a lot of inequity. If you're a CPS teacher, the resources that you have are not the resources that a lot of your suburban school district counterparts have across the state. For instance, I have a good friend of mine who was a CPS teacher. She was a first-year teacher, and she was writing up her own curriculum. She didn't have curriculum resources as a first teacher. And a lot of the suburban school districts actually provide curriculum resources to teachers so that a first-year teacher who's dealing with all of the new things that come with being a teacher, drafting up her own curriculum. She was working all kinds of late hours of the night to try to make this happen. We've got to make sure that our teachers have the resources they need to be successful in the classroom, and we also ought to reduce class sizes.
Yeah, I think it's very important that a few things, and I think this was done in terms of negotiations between CTU and CPS, is you need to have more time to prepare for your class. You need smaller class sizes. And the other thing is specifically, you need to be able to afford to live in the city in certain parts of it. If you have people who are struggling in their life and you have no social worker, you don't have a nurse, you don't have the community you need, and then you have a teacher with an overly sized class size who doesn't have enough time to even prep for the class, nor deal with the emotional needs of a student, that makes their life harder and it makes the student's life even more harder. We're tied together when it comes to teachers, parents, and students. We're all in this together, and it's important that when we deal with the issues in our schools, that we deal with each and every one of us.
Thank you. Billions of dollars for our community are allocated to city, state, and county through the census. What are you going to do, and what have you done to ensure that our communities are counted, especially after the mistreatment of Latinos through the citizenship question? What solution can you offer to the Latino community that, from all the attacks that people have been receiving in our community?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I think about is not only the census funding that needs to happen. I think oftentimes when it comes to census funding, it pits black versus brown. And what we actually need to do is be in together, because it's so vitally important when it comes to the resources of our communities that we need to stand together. Combine that with the fact that Donald Trump has been playing these games both with the citizenship question, but also sending supposedly border patrol to our neighborhoods to scare people from opening their doors, and to tell people we have their back, we have their support, because what he's doing there is playing a game, trying to suppress the census and play games as well in terms of the election. So I think it's important, not only the funding, but that sense of solidarity that we, as minority working class communities, are actually in this together.
Okay.
So prior to becoming a candidate running for office, I'm a lawyer. And so I spent a lot of time in my legal practice representing victims of domestic violence in their asylum proceedings. I sued Jeff Sessions' administration, the Justice Department, twice, and we won. And the reason why is because they've been attacking the Latinx community. They've been attacking a lot of groups. And I've stood up for this community, and I've stood up for my clients against the racist Justice Department, Jeff Sessions, and Trump in court, and I've won. And I'll continue to do that as state senator. As far as the census goes, another attack. You talk about the citizenship question, just an attempt to suppress the census and to reduce communities that have large Latinx populations, their influence in Congress and in the Electoral College is playing this game, and it's having a real negative effect on people. We have to continue to fight back Trump. We have to make sure we all stand up to get counted. And if it means we have to continue going door to door like we've done with this campaign, we'll keep doing it afterwards to make sure folks are aware, then we'll continue to do that.
So just a follow-up question. This morning we were informed that ICE detained a few more people in our community here in the southeast side of Chicago. What could you do in support, even though it's a federal issue, but what would you commit to doing to ensuring that ICE hears from our elected officials of this fear that they're creating in our communities and making it difficult for people to receive services because of the lack of fear? So what can you do as Robert and Ken?
Yeah, want me to answer it first? Let me first start off. Last year, I did the first ever ban in the entire country on private immigrant detention centers because ICE and ICA, a private prison company, as well as Donald Trump, tried to come to Illinois and build a 1,000-bed private immigrant detention center. And it was because organizations came together with elected officials to stand up to ICE and say enough is enough. I think it is important that we put pressure on ICE, we put pressure on in terms of the city and the county and the state, that they cannot come into our communities and literally just detain people. And so whether it means going door to door, whether it means speaking out at a press conference, whether it means having to sort of organize and rally folks to go downtown to Homeland Security, I'm willing to organize and fight to do whatever we can to tell Donald Trump and ICE that he's not coming to Illinois, that this is a sanctuary state.
I'm a lawyer, and so I have a lot of access to lawyers. I've worked a lot with the National Immigrant Justice Center downtown. And if it means me coming down and standing in the way, making sure that ICE agents know that people are going to be represented and seen by lawyers, then I'll be here. I showed up to O'Hare Airport when Trump implemented his first travel ban, and actually the Customs and Border Patrol agents who are sort of secondary to ICE in sort of how crazy they act and how unconstitutionally and reckless they act. They actually did change their behavior once they realized they were under a microscope. Once they realized that there were tens and tens of lawyers at the airport keeping an eye on them, watching people, they changed their behavior. So if we've got to flood lawyers and make sure we get folks down here so that folks know that they're being watched, then I'm happy to lead that effort.
Thank you. Next, last two questions. Thank you for your responses. It's a yes or no. Would you be in favor of taxing pensions? Yes or no? Ken?
Taxing pensions? Like pension income? Or
I believe so. That's what. Pensions.
taxing pensions? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm a little confused, but I don't think so.
Robert?
You mean pension income?
I'm not sure. Taxing pensions.
I won't tax pension income.
Got it. Okay. Last question. If you're elected as our state senator, will you, Robert, meet with the community organizations organizing this event the first 60 days after you take office?
Well,
Yes or no?
yes.
Ken?
First 30.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your responses. Now, each candidate will have 1 minute for closing statements. So we'll start with Robert.
I just want to say it's a Friday night. You all could be, anywhere with your friends, with your family, hanging out. I appreciate you all being here tonight. 13, 14 months ago, I became a state senator and I was able to pass 13 bills, the most for any freshman legislator elected or appointed. I was top 10 in the entire General Assembly. I believe that after 30 years of disinvestment in our communities, 30 years of mass isolation and loneliness, that the next 30 years, whether I'm a state senator or not, we can build and organize in rooms like this for the communities we deserve. We can reimagine safety and justice in our communities. We can reimagine what community looks like. We can reimagine what it means to have equitable development, one that combines clean energy with good jobs and good housing. So I just want to say thank you all for coming out tonight. If you ever need anything, you can always reach out to my office. If you ever want to get a cup of coffee with me, I'm always down to sit down and have that conversation with folks. Thank you.
I was born here in Chicago, raised in the South Burbs. My dad worked at the Southworks plant not far from here. My mom was a homemaker. My parents got divorced when I was very young, and neither of my parents had college degrees. If we didn't have the stableness of a union household income, I don't know where I'd be today. I focused on getting my education and working hard to get myself out of a cycle of poverty. I went to college and then I went to law school and I became a lawyer. And with my law degree, I spent a lot of time representing folks who were victims of domestic violence in their asylum proceedings against the Trump administration, rushing to the airport to fight for people who were under attack by Trump's travel ban. I represented folks who were low-income tenants in eviction court, because I know what it means to be housing insecure. I stayed with my grandma when I was young for a while. We have got to have people who have a history and a record for fighting from this community and has roots in this community. And I'm that person. So I hope you'll take a hard look at us.
Thank you so very much for coming out and meeting with us. Thank you. And we're going to hear right now from Robert Strong on upcoming town halls.
Good evening. My name is Robert Strong. I've lived on the Southeast Side for 35 years. I'm a member of the Crossroads Collaborative, Coalition for Southwark CBA, and a host of other organizations. But just let me echo on what some of my colleagues have already discussed and talked about. I am motivated by development. This is important to me, as well as others. Would you agree? Yes. There are 12 developments that are happening on the Southeast Side while I speak. So let me just remind you, two things we have to remember about development. It brings jobs, and it brings displacement. I'm for jobs. As most of you know, this area was zoned for industrial development. The Southworks U.S. Steel has come and is no longer gone. Toxic waste and hazardous materials were left. We're dealing with the contamination. To sum it up, people were saying, in the South Chicago area, we have become a dumping ground. But the upside to this is that we, the people, want to participate in the new developments. It can be done. We can implement it. New jobs can be brought in, and opportunities for people of all colors, classes, and cultures. There's a benefit here. So I say, we can have a community without displacement. We the people, we will survive. And finally, with all this said, we can have opportunity. Be a part in all development on the Southeast Side, and to make this community prosperous, once again, fair and equitable development. We will be hosting 2 community town hall meetings, one in South Shore at the Quarry on April 2nd, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., and the second in South Chicago at OLG, Our Lady of Guadalupe, on April 30th, 5:30 to 7:30. We will present what came out of our prior 3 prior community visioning sessions. The community's priorities, expectations for any development on the Southeast Side. Please come and share your feedback. This handout contains more information, and I thank you.
Chicago Press.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Gunn. I'm here on behalf of Grecian Associates. And we're working together to reinvigorate South Chicago Prize team. If you guys don't know, right now there's a huge grant in Chicago from the Chris Kirchhofer Foundation. It's $10 million to one neighborhood. How much? $10 million to one neighborhood on the south and west sides. We are one of 6 finalists out of 80 applications to win the $10 million. So we're in the process now of creating the second round of proposals. So what we have done is actually created a nice walking tour map. And our proposal consists of 9 projects, all along 91st and 92nd Street. And I'll quickly go over it. The first one is the old YMCA building. How many of you guys remember the old YMCA building? Grecian Associates and Polar Preservation of Affordable Housing have purchased it, and we're redeveloping it now, and we're preserving those 101 units of senior housing. That's happening regardless of the grants, but with the grant, we can reopen the pool that's there, so just swim. The second project is Our Lady of Guadalupe, the school and church right over on the street here. They want to build an indoor soccer arena and multi-purpose space in between the school and the church so that the kids can safely go in between and have a new community space. The third project is Via Guadalupe. It's the senior development with 53 units. That would just be capital improvements to the building. The fourth project is actually Pilgrim Baptist Church in South Chicago. It's a building attached to the back of this church here that's a shell. And so these funds will help build it out and create a performing arts center and other community services. The fifth project is new homes. So there's two homes that actually stopped construction when the housing market crashed. And the housing market has not recovered to get a lender to fund us. So this grant will help us finish those 2 homes and rent it out and create a home ownership readiness program. The sixth project is a cul-de-sac at the end of 92nd Street, and there'll be a new natural play-space garden and also stormwater management. The seventh project is streetscape improvements along 92nd Street. I know you guys may have heard a little bit about the Invest Southwest. That's hopefully going to do streetscape improvements along Commercial Avenue. So this money would kind of build off of that and go do streetscape improvements on 92nd Street. The last 2 projects is Sacred, which would be 78 new units of affordable housing for studio to 4 bedrooms, be a brand new development with hopefully a grocery store or commercial retail space on the ground floor. And then the last project is Cafe Rudish, which would be a cafe that would be workforce development, a small cafe with workforce development, and when they were trying to attract a coffee roaster to come in the top floor and do like a social enterprise. So we have one of the most ambitious proposals. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but if you walk along 91st and 92nd Street, there's huge 6-foot by 6-foot art installations, art paintings, and next to it is an informational sign so you can learn more about our project. So please grab one of these maps on your way out and just pray for us, root for us, however you cheer, so we can get $2 million in South Chicago.
Yeah. Now we'd like if Pastor Lassenby can come up and talk about the census.
Pilgrim Baptist Church is committed to our community being counted, but tonight we have a second generation person in our midst that knows census better than I can. I'd like to ask, can you help me welcome Cook County Commissioner Stanley Moore, the 4th District, as he comes to give us a scenario about our census. Can we receive that?
Good evening. Good evening. I just want to thank a couple of people. I want to first, let's give a round of applause for Pastor Cohen Lasby of Pilgrim Baptist Church. And then I came in, I see a couple of people in the room. I just want to announce them in the room. I want to thank Angela Herlock, first of all. Let's give her a round of applause for supplying her. And I saw Malia, how are you? Thank you. Also, I see Dwayne Robinson from the 8th Ward, Alderman Michelle Harris's office. Give me a round of applause for coming out. I want to also thank, I see Ed Get Down Crosby from Praise Cafe. Praise the Lord, brother. Thank you for coming out. And house music legend, Farley Jackmaster Funk. I see you sitting there. Thank you for coming out as well. Listen, one of the most important things we're going to do this year is to participate in the census. We can't let anybody deter us from participating. It's our dollars. That's our money. And then we deserve every dollar that we're supposed to give for our community. And there are people all across this country that would love nothing more than to reallocate that money somewhere else. And we're not going to let them do it. That's right. We have been fighting and fighting and fighting to make sure that we get the message out. Did everybody see that beautiful SUV sitting out front, that camper that the pastor has? Did you see it say, "We count to"? That is so impressive. I am so thankful for everyone that's working on this census effort here. We have put together $4 million from the county to spend in the hardest to count communities all across Cook County just to get this message out. This money is the money that goes to our schools, our roads, our bridges, our streets, our infrastructure, everything that comes down from the state government, all the federal dollars that come from the feds to the state to us is allocated by the population. So they look at the numbers, they see how many people live in this community, and that's the dollar amount that comes to our community. And we're not gonna let them take that money away from these children. Elected officials, all the time, we stand here and people say, I'm sick of how my school looks, I'm sick of how this looks, I hate these streets, there's so much crime and this is going on. Well, let me tell you something. If we don't get that census money, do you know how the elected officials have to make up that money for their community? Taxes. Somebody said, who said it over there? There it is, right there. They raise taxes. And so you keep asking yourself, why do they keep raising taxes? They keep raising taxes on us. The reason they keep raising taxes is because we always complain when it's too late. We need to complain in the beginning. We need to make sure that every person in our community participates. If there's a child in that home that is living with their grandparents, they need to be counted. If there are seniors that are living in an apartment building that don't particularly participate, they need to be counted. And this year is going to be the most challenging of all because this is the first time they're going to do it all on the internet. They're asking us to participate on the internet. And our seniors, I don't know about you, but my father, my mother, and all of them, they read all their mail. And then people my age, we read some of our mail. And then people younger than that, they read no mail. And my father, I bought him one of those Alexas. You know what an Alexa is? And it says what the time. I said, hey, Dad, plug this in. It'll tell you what time, what shows, what movies, what do you want to hear. And he said, oh, that's great, son. Thank you. 2 weeks later, I came over, and I said, Alexa, what time is it? Alexa? Alexa. I looked at my dad and said, I cut that damn thing off. She was listening to me. That's the reason our seniors do not trust putting their information on the internet. They don't want to do it. And if our seniors who don't participate this time, they're our most reliable resource. We need your help, and I'm asking you to participate. Thank you so much. I'm Stanley Moore.
Okay. We want to remind everyone, March 17th is our election day. However, voting places are open now. You can go to all the early voting sites. In-person voting and registration has begun. Please see the handout with more information on voting locations for the green sheet. You can also visit the Chicago Board of Elections. Si tienen equipo de traducción, si lo pueden entregar. Just a reminder, we're going to continue with the second part of the forum, but we want to thank Senator Robert Peters and candidate Ken Thomas for attending. Thank you. And just for a reminder, for those new people who showed up, if you have any election buttons or candidate buttons, please remove those. We are a nonpartisan group of organizations, and we want to make sure that we remain nonpartisan here. Thank you.